Hey, welcome back to Divinely Uninspired, episode 11. We got a good one for you today. I'm here with April, and she is numb because she went to the dentist today. How you doing, April?
I'm good. How are you, Rusty?
I'm good. It sounds like you're holding on to your tongue with your fingers.
Do you need a napkin or a bib?
Oh my gosh,
Do you need
whatever.
a bib?
Is there a little bit of drool coming out?
Whatever. I quit.
Yeah, just a little bit. And with Jeremy, as always.
Season's greetings, everyone.
All right, he's in the festive mood. And Spencer's joining us today.
What up?
How are you, Spencer?
I'm great, man.
We found out over the weekend that you know who Kevin Costner is. We're proud of you for that.
I
Yeah.
do. There's officially one thing on the list that I do know, and it's Kevin Costner.
I do have a couple of more things I wanted to ask you about. I realized that like I was a kid. Do you know what a light bright is?
Oh, yeah. I had a light bright.
Oh, okay.
I'm not that old. I'm not that young.
Do you know who Strawberry Shortcake is?
Yes.
I love strawberry
Absolutely.
shortcake.
How do you know who Strawberry Shortcake is?
Girls at my school were really into strawberry shortcake. I can't vouch for myself because
Strawberry shortcake made a comeback a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't aware of that.
Light bright was awesome, though.
Who do you know who Engelbert Humperdinck is? Oh, okay. Well, he's a Jewish singer. So I don't know why I thought you'd know that, because probably April and Jeremy don't know who Engelbert Humperdinck is. Okay, good. Close enough. Anyway, we're glad to be with you. Sorry, we're a week late. We had a little thing called Grinchmas going on last week, and it kind of dominated everything. But we got a lot to talk about. First things first, here's a song. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're listening to Divinely Uninspired, podcast by Journey Church Shepherdsville, hosted by Jeremy Willis and me, Rusty Wilson. You can find us online at journeyshepherdsville.com. For questions or comments, email podcast@journeyshepherdsville.com. Maybe we'll feature your question or comment on a future episode. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show. So I really like it when people say words incorrectly or funny pronunciations of words. And we got to talking about it because 2 weeks ago, Jeremy, you were preaching and you were talking about Adam and Eve being naked, and no less than like 15 times you said naked, except when you pronounce naked, you pronounce it neked. Nekkid.
Exactly.
And I just want to know, where does that pronunciation come from?
I have no idea.
Does your family say it that way, or you
I don't know. So here's my rule, and we've talked about this. I say a lot of words probably wrong, and especially too, I think and I always say this, like when I preach on a Sunday, I'm using about 4,000 words. And I know that I should probably be really focused on how I pronunciate every single one of those 4,000 words. But to be honest with you, I'm just not. And so I say a lot of words funny. I'm also Bullitt County educated, and my English teacher pretty much just pushed me through. So I'm not sure my grammar is great. My wife has an English major, so you should hear some of the conversations that we have. But here's what I'll say about it. And I do think it's funny because people do say a lot of funny words. I learned long ago not to be the grammar police, because in my mind, the moment you correct me on something I say, that gives me full access to say anything that you say wrong. So I just kind of let it go and just let people say what they say.
He's wrong. He gets on me all the time when I say things wrong.
It's not that you say them wrong. It's just the way you say them.
I actually love that you pronounce. See, that's a word that I can't say. That you pronounce it naked. I people have called me out for it before. And then the other one, but I always get confused on effect and effect. You know, effect. Affect.
That one bugs me.
That one always.
I never know when to use one or the other.
Well, I know when to use it, but I know when to use it, but my brain doesn't always tell my mouth which one to use in the proper context. So
you're from Bullitt County, so it kind of sounds the same either way. But there's some other words that people say wrong that I just kind of had to put a list together of things that I know that people say. Crick. For a creek. You ever heard that one? Crick.
Somebody was saying that the other day.
Yeah.
I have never heard that. And maybe I just got used to people saying it, because people do say it like that around here. I think that's the other thing about being from Bullitt County is you just get used to people saying words wrong, but you still know what they're trying to say. Yep. And so it's almost like when people are texting, I'm the worst at texting because on emails, I'm very careful, but on text, I never edit myself, even though I know 100% that I should. And so like, especially with auto, like the auto, when it puts the words in sometimes I'll like read the text and I'll be like, they probably think I was like drunk or something when I said this. And I literally just don't do it. But here in Bullitt County, I've just gotten used to people saying words wrong, but I understand what they're trying to say. And so, but that's just my perspective from being from here.
Yeah, I think that works. I had a friend that used to say instead of similarly, it was simularly.
Simula?
Yeah, it's similar. It's like, I don't know.
That's just wrong.
People who drink espressos.
Oh yeah, that one
No,
I've heard.
No.
Espresso.
Yeah, it's a very fast drink.
Yeah.
My wife does this one, and I tell her all the time, like, you're so intelligent, but you pronounce this word incorrect, and just what it is. She'll say, well, it's supposedly, it's like, no, it's supposedly
With a Z.
supposedly. I do this one though. I could care less,
Yeah, I say that one.
and
I couldn't
Yeah.
care less.
couldn't care
right?
less.
Yes.
But I could care less, and I'm saying it wrong. And this is another one that I do, and this irritates my mother to no end. But when you're measuring how tall something is, you're measuring its height, not height.
Height.
Because
yeah.
you've got width and height.
Oh.
I don't. Those are mine. Anybody else have any?
Irregardless.
Irregardless. Yeah,
Instead of
that's good.
regardless?
That's a
Yeah.
good one.
Saying Pacific instead of specific.
Yeah. That's a good one.
specifically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You
Drives
have any
me
April?
nuts.
Anything you say right now is going to sound wrong.
That's
anyway.
right. That's why I'm just not going to say anything.
All right.
What's one that we've called you out for saying?
Oh gosh, I don't know. You all call me out for so much.
I feel like we call you out for people that you use the wrong reference more than like words you say.
I don't know. I can't think of
Like
anything.
Cayenne West.
Cayenne West.
Okay, whatever.
yeah.
Okay, so see, that's a perfect
There was
example.
that day.
He's being the police right now. So
No, Cayenne and Kanye. That's a guy's name.
that's okay. I say it right now.
I would actually love to
Actually-
hear Cayenne West music. I think I would enjoy it.
But he changed his name, so it's not even either one of them.
now it's just
Yeah,
Yay or
yeah,
Yee.
yay or
It was
yee.
Yeezy, but then he officially changed it to Yay or Yee, yeah, however you pronounce it.
Yeah. Well, I could care less. All right. So we've got the war on.
Irregardless.
Yeah, irregardless. Let's move on. So we've all heard people talk about the war on Christmas, and I think the war has hit kind of a fever pitch because recently the people over at Hidden Valley decided they were going to start selling something called ranch nog.
Hey, if it's hidden, how did they find it?
I don't know. I don't know. It's
I did read on their website today. It's only being sold like select places, so maybe it's hidden in that form. You can't just go out and buy it at Walmart.
well, I think it's
'Cause I
actually like
tried
a
to.
packet like that you have to
Ew.
mix
Oh.
with eggnog.
I feel like
Yuck.
Hidden Valley every couple years is just coming out with weird stuff. Like they're like reaching. They're like waiting for something else to catch on.
well, they know how stupid Americans are, and they're
Yeah.
going to be like, "Hey, if
Yep.
it's got ranch on it, they're
this-
going to buy it."
But this one is disgusting. Go
Yeah,
ahead and
I
explain it. Yeah,
honestly-
I don't think you fully explained it yet, but go ahead.
No,
and-
no,
yeah.
no. So it is a ranch flavored eggnog drink.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
it says this: Hidden Valley continues to find strange items to sell in their ranch shop, and arriving today is the Hidden Valley Ranch Shop. While supplies last, the limited edition holiday ranch nog kit. It features everything necessary to make this unholy merger of two creamy concoctions:
Ugh.
eggnog and ranch dressing.
That's
Gross.
disgusting.
I think I would dip wings in this. in this type
That's
of
the thing.
nog.
I'm not a huge ranch guy. Like I know that
I
has
hate
become
ranch.
like almost replaced ketchup for
That
some
is
people.
amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not a big ranch guy. I do like running ranch. You know, I'm talking about like the thin ranch that like restaurants use and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But-
like a house ranch.
yeah, but like real thin. You know, like and like buffalo wings, I'll eat it on buffalo wings. But outside of buffalo wings, I just don't do a lot of ranch. And so the thought of drinking ranch like makes me throw up in my mouth just a little bit.
Yeah.
My wife, she dips pizza into ranch.
Oh, me too.
And like there's so many people who like they put ranch on pizza, and I've never understood that, and I don't think I'll ever understand ranch nog.
Well,
Well-
ranch is essentially just sour cream. I mean, it's sour cream with some other
Spices.
spices.
Mm-hmm. Buttermilk, sour
Yeah.
cream, and spices. Yeah.
It's really good though on pizza, especially if you get the cheap pizza. So think like Little Caesars and you need a little extra.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Little Caesars is perfect without anything
Whatever.
on it.
I do like Little Caesars.
For
The one in Shepherdsville's good.
I saw a thing on Twitter the other day. It made me laugh. It said something about, the year is 2052 and I've gotten my 18th booster and I'm paying $555 for a hot and ready. And it made me laugh that, because things are more
That would
expensive
be a
these
good
days.
youth game to have kids chug ranch, like ranch.
Oh,
you could
I
probably
was-
make your own.
I was literally just about to tell you. So Rusty sent us the notes this morning. I saw ranch nog, and I went online to try to buy it, and I couldn't buy it online. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take ranch and eggnog and pour it into a cup and have a student drink it at a
Ew.
Christmas
Do
party.
a blender.
Can I
So-
say something else too about eggnog? Eggnog is overrated. If you've had custard is so much better.
I've never
Far
had
better.
custard,
Oh,
so I don't know.
I've had custard like in a donut and
No,
frozen.
boiled custard. They sell it like just during the holidays. It tastes like, so I used to use when I was a kid, and it's weird. I used to let my vanilla ice cream melt, and then I would drink it.
Okay.
And that's what it tastes like. It just tastes like a melted vanilla, like ice cream bowl. But it's called boiled custard, and it's
Boiled?
pretty awesome.
They just sell it at the store.
Sell it at the store, boiled custard.
All right. Well, we'll have to. That sounds very similar.
Sounds better than ranch nog.
A milkshake.
For
It
sure.
is.
Yep.
It basically is a milkshake. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, so maybe you're into other weird Christmas food items. Anybody have any weird Christmas foods or like things that are unique to your? We kind of talked about stuff for Thanksgiving food items, but we like food. And so, any like, what's your favorite Christmas goodie? Do you have one?
I go crazy over the I don't remember what brand it is. Is it Hillshire Farm? The summer sausage
Oh, yeah.
things they make. Is it Hillshire Farm that does that? Those are I don't ever crave summer sausage any time of the year, but like it's not Christmas if I don't have that Hillshire Farm summer sausage with that smoked Gouda that they have.
Yes.
Like that stuff's amazing.
You got to like go to the mall where they have
You
a
gotta go to the
kiosk.
mall. Target sells it too now.
cool.
But yeah,
I didn't-
but yeah, you used to have to go to the mall to the kiosk and get it. But yeah.
And then there was a pop-up kiosk. There was all kinds of those pop-up kiosks.
They give you those little strawberry candies that you see nowhere else except for in those boxes.
And nobody wants them.
Yeah, nobody wants them.
Everybody, here, give this away. I don't want it.
Speaking of kiosks, actually, one of the things growing up, we had a kiosk in our mall where you would go and they'd have like the candied almonds and pecans. You know, they had like they were like coated in like brown sugar or whatever.
Like
But
the German roasted nuts, that type of thing.
I guess so.
praline and whatever.
Yeah, when I had braces as a kid, I popped a brace off on one of those
Oh. But yeah,
German roasted things.
we would always go and get those whenever we did like our Christmas shopping. That was always really special.
So that's your Christmas goodie is the
yeah.
the
I
nut.
Do you think people in Germany eat those nuts, or you think it's
No.
just like the American thing we do? We just attach a country to it. and
Yeah, it's
say,
like French fries. The
Yeah.
French don't eat
this is
those.
all-
or
all-
Chinese food.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just an Americanized
Yeah.
version of it.
like we went over to Germany, you'd be really disappointed if you were craving some of those
yeah,
nuts over there.
there's no pub pretzels that
Yeah.
are like what we have here. or,
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so sorry,
maybe there's schnitzel.
we went off the rail, but yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
What about you, April? Do you have a favorite Christmas goodie?
I love peppermint. So Trader Joe's makes a really good peppermint bark that I love. That they only
Okay, I
have
thought you just meant peppermints. Like,
no. I like peppermint flavor.
We have a whole thing of those
There's a
out there,
whole thing of
April.
it.
I know. I'm excited about that. But no, so I love Trader Joe's. Like I said, it's a peppermint bark. They only carry at Christmas time. It's my favorite.
okay,
Why is it called bark?
I don't know, but I'm going to get some Friday when I
There's
leave the
peppermint
doctor.
trees, Jeremy. They go
Huh?
out, there's peppermint trees. They go out and they peel the bark off the peppermint.
That's
tree.
not true at all.
No,
I know.
it's
I'm
not.
just making it up.
So my family's favorite, or my favorite in my family is we call it goop, and it's essentially homemade Chex Mix, but it doesn't taste like regular Chex Mix because it's made with the goodness of my grandmother's recipe. And so my mom refuses to give the recipe to any of us before her death because she doesn't want us making it because then I guess she'll feel like we don't need her anymore. But we do. So give us that recipe, Mom. We could use it. And I have not had a single bite of goop this year and didn't really get much last year because of COVID. And so I
Is
got
it-
hankering for it.
Is it kind of like puppy chow? Because
No.
I've had that. Okay.
No, puppy chow. This is like salty.
We had
So
a debate about puppy chow yesterday
Yeah,
because you
I-
had reindeer food for the first time.
I did.
Yeah, two different things.
I didn't know that until yesterday.
I didn't either.
They both use Chex. Chex Mix is doing well during the holidays.
Yeah, I'm sure they
Like
are.
whoever, like I don't think anybody probably buys a box of Chex the entire year, and then the holidays between Chex Mix, puppy chow, reindeer food, goop. Apparently,
That's right.
They must do really well during the holidays.
Well, my favorite way to eat Chex Mix during the regular part of the year was to douse it in sugar. So you had to that like sugar silt at the bottom where you had to
Yep.
like sift. That was the best part of the breakfast. But I don't think they let kids do that anymore. I don't know. My parents were like, here, it doesn't have enough sugar on it. Let me sprinkle more on there. So
Yeah.
but cereal's not any good anymore. All right, let's move right along. So I like to read. Jeremy likes to read. April, do you like to read?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Spencer, what about you? Do you like to read?
I like to read. I was telling you this morning though, sometimes it's really difficult for me to get into a book. So I often don't read a lot of books, but
But when you do,
when I do, yeah. I
Okay.
enjoy reading.
well, it's important to read, and we want to give you some recommendations and just kind of talk a little bit about some of our favorite books from the year. And these are not necessarily books that came out this past year; they're just books that we have read in the past year that we would like to recommend to you. So I'm going to go first because I've been thinking about the two books that I wanted to talk about. And the first one I mentioned earlier on in the year, and it's a book called A Church Called Tove by Scott McKnight and his daughter, Laura Barringer. And I'm a big Scott McKnight fan. I really like a lot of his writings and teachings. And the whole concept of the book is looking at churches that have a culture of goodness, which is, tov is the Hebrew word for goodness, versus a culture of toxicity. And he just lays out that this is what a church that is toxic looks like. And we've seen a lot of those in the last, several years, how that's starting to rear its ugly head. Some of us even part of toxic churches at some point. And then what a goodness culture in a church looks like. And what's hard through reading that is going through and being like, oh, yep, I recognize I've seen this happen in real life. And yep, I have experience in these areas, but then also getting to see like where the church has got really awesome things going on and the people of God are moving and doing great things for his kingdom, to see what that looks like and also being able to identify, oh yeah, I'm a part of a church that does have this culture. And so there's a lot of church hurt out there and we hear more and more about it now, maybe more than ever, just with social media and things. And so if you're looking for a good book on the church, A Church Called Tove by Scott McKnight and Laura Barringer. And then the second book I read this year, and this is not an editorial comment on terms of what you might believe about human sexuality or whatever. This is just about the way Christians engage with the homosexual community. But this book is called Heavy Burdens, 7 Ways LGBTQ Christians Experience Harm in the Church, by Bridget Eileen Rivera. And in this book, she is not making a case for whether to affirm or condemn homosexuality. She herself is a homosexual. She is rather just pointing out the way that people who are homosexual have been hurt by things the church has done over the years. And it was just really, really powerful because I think it can be one of those things where we forget that we're talking about people. We're just talking about an idea or something a little more abstract. And she just lays out these stories about people's lives, and kind of the way she starts off the book is she's telling this story. She's sitting in a small group and this mother is weeping and she says, I just really need you all to pray for my son. I can't go into it. And she knows that her son has come out as gay. And, the mother turns to her and says, I think I'd rather he was dead than be gay. And so she just talks about this concept of how much hurt has been there for the homosexual person. And I just think that that's one of those things that we need to consider, even if we don't agree with, and I'm not saying what anybody's position is here, because that's not my place, but to be able to recognize that we shouldn't be harming anybody, irregardless of where we feel about their position. So anyway, those are the two books that I recommend this year: Heavy Burdens and A Church Called Tove. So, Jeremy, you got any books that you would recommend for 2021?
Yeah, I didn't know we were supposed to pick 2, so
you can just pick one.
Like 8.
Oh, okay. Well, recommend as many as you want.
Yeah, so I do read a lot. I probably read 2 or 3 books a month at least, depending on. Some of them I start and then I put down. So it's not like I'm trying to be like, I'm not like Mark Driscoll. I read a book in 15 minutes or whatever he said. But so several I recommend. The first one is 7 Things I Wish Christians Knew About the Bible. It's Michael Bird. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. We're starting our What Is class back up in January, and a lot of the content that he put out there is stuff that I covered in that class. And it's a lot of stuff that people don't know about the Bible, but especially in light of what we're going to talk about here in a few minutes with what Jeremy thinks about, it's really important that people understand the Bible, how we got it, and some of the details about it. So that's a great book. I just picked up this one. I'm halfway through it, but The Genius of Jesus. It's Erwin Raphael McManus. I've always loved Erwin McManus. He's out in California, and he's like an artist, meets a preacher, meets like he's just a really creative guy, and the way that he talks about Jesus it's not like earth shattering, but it's just really creative and I really appreciate it. A book I think everybody should have in their house is On Living Well. It's Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson is the one that translated The Message and wrote a lot of other stuff, but they just released a book of a lot of his writings that he never released. And it's almost like a devotional. Like each writing is only like a page. It's only like paragraphs, but it's really, really good. And I really, really have enjoyed it. On Living Well. An Altar in This World, Barbara Brown Taylor. This is the latest one I've read. Anything Barbara Brown Taylor writes, you need to read. She is by far one of my favorite writers. Just the way she, dances with words and concepts is unreal. And she is so smart. The book I just finished 2 days ago actually is This Anything by Jerry Seinfeld. I often say like preachers, the only relatable field I think to us is stand-up comedians. And I don't think I'm a stand-up comedian, but the idea of getting in front of an audience for 40 minutes and just putting yourself out there, there's really only those two worlds exist where that kind of happens. And I just think Jerry Seinfeld's funny. So I read that. The Thing Beneath the Thing by Steve Carter. I told you I had a lot. I still got 2 more. The Thing Beneath the Thing by Steve Carter is really good. Turning 40 this year. Anybody that knows me, especially people around this table right now, know that I have some quirks and some personality things. And there's some things I've been dealing with and trying to work through the last 2 years. And this book was really good because it's just, there's always something behind why you are the way you are, why you think the way you think. So it was really good to hear him say some of the things that I've been thinking. The next book to follow that up is called Surrounded by Idiots. It's Tom Erickson, and it's about personality traits of people and how to work with them. It's a really good book. And
that's what we were going to call this podcast before we landed on Divinely
Surrounded by Idiots. And then the last one I recommend, this is an academic book if you're really interested in doing a very deep dive of the Bible, is The New Testament and Its World. It's N.T. Wright and Michael Bird. It's a really expensive book. It was released in an academic volume, and I just had to have it because I love both of those guys. And so if you want to do a really, really, really intensive deep dive and you got $100 to spend, buy that book because it's worth it. But those are the books I recommend, and I have plenty more, but those are the ones I read this year that I really enjoyed.
Awesome. And what about you, April? Do you have any books that
I
you'd
just
like to
bought the
recommend?
N.T. Wright book, so I'm super excited about that because I love him too. But so a couple books I've already read them before, but I'm rereading them. Mainly one of them, we're going to do a women's event at the beginning of the year. So I kind of wanted to refresh my memory on it, but it's Redeeming Love. We've talked about it before. Jeremy,
Oh my gosh.
I knew he was going to say something smart.
It's like 600 pages.
It's an
like
incredible
a romance
book.
novel.
So it's a fiction story. Like the author does an incredible job taking the book of Hosea.
Who's the author?
Francine Rivers.
Hosea is only like 20 pages. Why does she need 600 pages to talk about a 20
She-
page
They just came
story?
out with the movie of it too.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to do in January, early February, the women's team. So anyway, so I
Who
wanted to
plays
reread it.
Gomer?
I'm going to smack him.
I'm sure it's a great book. I'm
Who's
sorry.
in the movie? I'm curious. Who's in the movie?
Gomer Powell.
Yeah, I'm not.
I didn't recognize anybody.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, honestly. It looks great.
Is it a Hallmark movie?
No.
But it would be a great Hallmark movie.
I did tease Jamie, but I do tease April. But Jamie read it and said it was really good.
It really is a phenomenal book, but it's good because it just reminds you of God's consistent pursuit of us, despite like our issues or whatever. So I love that book. Rereading that for January, and then another one that I just finished not too long ago, and I've talked about that one before as well. But it's Philip Yancey, Reaching for the Invisible God. Definitely one of my all-time favorite books. So
Cool. Very good. And Spencer, what about you?
Yeah. So first one is actually fiction. I've never done this before. I watched the movies, loved the movies, and I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down this year and I'm just going to work through the whole series. But I read The Hobbit. Beth, my wife, bought me the whole box set of the trilogy and then The Hobbit. And so I made it through The Hobbit and loved it.
Who's your favorite character?
In The Hobbit,
Yeah.
that's difficult. Probably Thorin, Thorin Oakenshield. He's pretty cool.
Does The Hobbit take place before or after the original Lord of the Rings?
Before.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's
It's
that's how the ring was.
discovered.
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Bilbo took the ring from Smaug.
Yep.
From Gollum, and then
from Gollum.
from Gollum, not Smaug.
Mhm.
Smaug's the dragon.
Yep.
And brings it back to the Shire,
Yep.
and then Lord of the Rings fast forwards several
Yep.
decades.
There's gonna be some Lord of the
I
Rings.
really wouldn't know it was before or after. It's too much information. You
Yeah.
guys just told me. I've seen the movies. People always assume that I'm into Tolkien because like I am into C.S. Lewis, but like I'd never got into Tolkien.
right.
I know it's good
Surprisingly,
stuff.
I enjoy the story of Lord of the Rings more than I do Chronicles of
Yes.
Narnia. A
Me
little
too.
bit.
Mhm.
I agree.
Chronicles of
Lord of the Rings is
Narnia
awesome.
they're like, there's such good stories, but like I feel like Lord of the Rings is just a little bit deeper and
Mhm.
like
I think
there's like more action.
But here's
I don't
what
know.
my take. I think Chronicles of Narnia is some of his worst fiction writing. C.S. Lewis had a lot of crazy books out there. That
Screw Tape is one of my favorites.
But I think
I'm
even
too
like his
rusty.
Odysseys and like his space books and
Yeah, he
stuff
has
like
space
that,
books.
like those are pretty good.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know Tolkien's great. I just never got into him.
Yeah. But yeah, The Hobbit comes before Lord of the Rings.
And we'll take an hour or two after this, and we'll lay out the whole chronology, going all the way back to the Silmarillion.
It's like one of my buddies was trying to get me into Star Wars books one time. There's like 600 Star Wars books.
Oh, yeah,
and
it's all,
and none of them matter anymore.
I was like, I just want to
it's all
watch the
fan
movies.
fiction.
Like, I just want to watch the movies.
Yeah.
All right, what's your second book
So that
there,
was
Spencer?
The Hobbit. And then earlier on in the year, it's funny. It was a book that was given to me while I was in seminary, actually. And I just never read it. But then I had somebody recommend it to me again, and they were like, you really need to read this. But it's Delighting in the Trinity by Michael Reeves. And it's just it's a doctrine of the Trinity. But the Michael Reeves, man, he goes into just spectacular detail of the relationship between Jesus and his Father, and how that, inspired creation and different things like that. And it's phenomenal. Not many theological books I can say that I haven't been able to put down, but that was one of them. I think I finished it in like a day and a half, and it was awesome. So
Cool.
It's an easy read too.
Awesome. Well, if you were having any concerns about coming up with Christmas presents for people, we just gave you a list of like 1,000 books, thanks to Jeremy, that you can go out and purchase and gift or read yourself. And if you have recommendations for us, we'd love to see those. You can send them our way on podcast@journeyshepherdsville.com. All right. So last week or a week and a half ago or so, I got an email from a listener, and he had a question that he wants to know what Jeremy thinks. And so Jeremy's had plenty of time to think on this, and he's going to dive into this. But the question was essentially, and I'm going to just paraphrase it here a little bit, what about all of the good people who do not know Jesus as their Savior? Is there no hope for them to go to heaven? So essentially, good people, but they're not in relationship with Jesus. Do they have any hope of an eternity in heaven? So let's hear.
What does Jeremy think?
Yeah. So here's what I want to do today that's a little different than what we've done before in these. And so I think one of the things that I've always taught is it's not so much what I think, especially when I teach on Sunday. I'm not trying to tell you what to believe. I'm just trying to push the envelope, get you to wrestle with the tension that I think exists in the scriptures. I do have points of view and opinions about certain things. And I'll go ahead and tell you right now, not everybody's going to agree with my point of view on this topic. So again, that's one of those things where I thought this would be more of a discussion maybe with all of us, but I'll give some kind of guiding points. And so I love this question. It is a very complex question. And the reason I think that it's very complex is because I think a lot of people, when they ask this question, and it is very commonly asked, not only of me, but any pastor. And I mean, you can just Google that phrase that was just used, and you're going to find thousands of articles and books. The complexity of that question for me, though, comes down to, for most people, when they're asking this question, it's personal. They're thinking about a person or a group of people that they know. They're not thinking about the complexity of the question from a worldwide perspective, and not just the world that we live in, the world throughout human history. And the reason it's very complex is because we do know that we live in a world where not everybody has heard the gospel. We also live in a world where the gospel has not always been presented as good news. That some places, the version of the gospel you get is not presented as good news at all. We have through church history in the last 1,000 years where there were people that were presented with accept this or you die, and that does not come off as good news. And so that is why it's a complex question, because there are so many people that have lived throughout human history, and specifically the last 2,000 years since Jesus walked the earth, that either weren't presented the gospel themselves the way that we as Americans have been presented it, and definitely weren't presented this as if it was good news that it was intended to be. We're given bad versions of it. I mean, even people today are still given bad versions of it. So it makes it a really complex question. Where this idea comes from, essentially what they're asking is Jesus the only way to heaven? Is Jesus the only way to God? The easy answer is John 14. And so in John 14, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so sounds like a very definitive statement. And But there's a couple problems with this statement, and this is why it gets very complex to ask this question. Jesus does not say, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to heaven except through me. He says the Father. We often assume that what he's talking about is going to heaven. N.T. Wright says, actually in the book I just recommended, very often people have come to the New Testament with the presumption that going to heaven when you die is the implicit point of it all. They acquire that viewpoint from somewhere, but not from the New Testament. Often the idea of coming to God himself turns into a conversation of, am I going to heaven or not? Once again, they got this idea from somewhere. It just wasn't the New Testament. And so if you follow along with that track of thinking, oftentimes when you think you have a definitive verse, I mean, one of the things that we joke about with April is like some of these like signs that she has and like coffee mugs. One of the problems is when you isolate Bible verses by themselves, you can get in trouble real fast. I am not saying that Jesus isn't the best way to God. And maybe at the end of the day, he is the only way to God. But I think it becomes very complicated with a lot of this. In fact, if you follow the next several verses, he essentially says, and he follows it up in 7, if you had known him, you had known my Father also. If you know me, you know my Father also. So he's not even talking about heaven. You know what I'm saying? He's not talking about where you go when you die. He's talking about what it looks like to actually see who God could be. And what he's talking about is that you see God through me. You see God through the way that I interact with people. You see God through this type of thing. And no point is Jesus even talking about heaven. The second thing is that's really important about this verse, and this is why I'm saying all this to kind of set up where I'm going to go with this. These guys probably had no idea what heaven would even be like, or even have like, more than likely being a first century Jewish person, they wouldn't even know if heaven exists. You know, their understanding of the afterlife is so much different than ours. And so to me, what's fascinating about this question is it often becomes very personal. And so what they're wanting to know is, I know somebody that's not a Christian. What's the chance of them going to heaven? I don't know. That's way above my pay grade. Or it comes from the place of they want everybody else. We get really consumed with how many people are going to hell. You ever notice that? And they're like, there's like a bunch of people we hope they're going to be in hell. You know, one of my favorite quotes that Andy Stanley said years ago when Rob Bell's book came out that was really controversial was, he goes, you know, this guy, Rob Bell, that people say, oh, he tried to erase hell, you know, and Andy Stanley's famous quote was, well, I hope he's right. I hope there isn't a hell. I mean, I don't want people going to hell. Do you? You know, and I think it's one of those things where some people get really indignant on, they want certain people to be in hell. And so they get really fixated on that. And so to me, sometimes this question comes from, when I talk to people about it, where are you coming from? Like that helps me to answer the question in all honesty. Does that make sense? And so, so that's one of those things. Now, again, I do believe that Jesus is the best way to live and following him. And I do believe Jesus makes you better at life and makes your life better. And I do believe that Jesus makes it very clear, and the scriptures make it very clear through what Jesus does on the cross and what comes of that, and that we're saved by faith in him. But then at the same time, also, if you guys are Bible students, you also know in Romans chapter 2, Paul kind of gets a little dicey with some of his language. And in Romans chapter 2, he doesn't really make it very definitive how we get to the afterlife as far as like on judgment day and stuff like that. He kind of gives this idea that in some ways we'll be judged according to the light that we've been given, and which comes back to my original point. What happens to people that didn't get the light? I mean, let's be honest. Most people in America, like, you don't really have an excuse for saying you didn't hear the gospel. I mean, you can turn on a television show, a basketball game, and John 3:16 is going to be there somewhere. And hopefully at least at one point in your life, you've decided to look up John 3:16. There are people that have lived throughout human history that did not have that opportunity. And again, like I said, it's been presented to them in a bad way. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. There's a lot of times I don't want to make definitive statements because I don't know. I do believe that what Jesus does on earth is a representation of God and being close to the Father. I believe it's the best way. But to say it's the only way, you know, not even from a preacher or somebody, because I know I'm going to get in trouble for this answer, but to be honest with you, the wrestling that I have is I'm not sure. I don't know. Because you also have the history of the whole Old Testament, all of the Jews that were not followers of Jesus, you know, they didn't have that plan. And so even within the Bible itself, it becomes a very complicated, which is where Romans 2 gets a little bit confusing for some people. And so anyway, so that's kind of the way to answer it. I don't know if I really answered it as much as I just kind of said, this is just some thoughts to think about.
Well, I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of unanswerable.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it is we don't know for sure. But at the same time, I think that I agree with everything that you just said. We are so consumed with the afterlife. Like that is a lot of people become a Christian because they want to go to heaven, not because they recognize that, oh, well, I want to submit my life to Jesus and bring forth this kingdom that is, here and not yet, which the early church was all about instituting the kingdom that here on earth. And our concept of what heaven is going to be like is, 99% of the things that we sing in songs about heaven and hear people say about heaven are not biblically accurate. Like the idea that we would go somewhere rather than God coming to us is just, it's completely inaccurate according to the Bible.
I agree. I mean, that's a good point you brought up. I mean, when you really study the first probably 2 centuries of the church, heaven is almost like a bonus. Like they were much more concerned about how they live and what they're doing here than they ever were about heaven. What I think flipped at some point was the other thing too is, and this is getting off on a different tangent, but I think it really does apply to a lot of this stuff is we are so obsessed with death because we're scared to death of it. Literally, we're scared of it.
Yeah.
Death was just a part of their world. And so there wasn't the striving. I mean, everybody wants to live, but you know what I'm saying? Like death was just, especially in third world countries,
right?
They are so much more comfortable with death than we are. And so I think that we get hyper focused on, I don't want to die, but if I'm going to die, I need to know exactly what's going to happen next. And to be honest with you, again, that's why I recommended some of those books I recommended earlier. The Bible doesn't make that its main objective. And I think that, even the book of Revelation, it's first century post-apocalyptic Jewish literature. That's what it is. And you may not know what that means. That's why you should take the What is the Bible class. But there's definitely some things we pull out of that, but we get so focused on that book and forget about the rest of them, which were honestly, in my opinion, were probably the early Christians would have considered the more important books and really how they live now versus what's going to happen maybe someday and what that looks like,
Yeah. And even the rest of the world is still more comfortable with death than we are. In a lot of other countries, there isn't in being embalmed and having a plan for when you die. Those are luxuries that they can't afford. Oftentimes the day you die is the day that your funeral happens because, well, we can't afford to, put this body in a morgue for days until everybody gets here. I had a good friend who his mom died while he was here in the States. And by the time we were able to get him home 2 days later, the funeral had already happened and people were starting to move on. Not that they weren't grieving, they were, but that it's just something that the rest of the world experiences on a more regular basis than we do. And so we become hyper focused on it.
And I'll say, I do believe this. I think following Jesus is the best way. And I think that if we took seriously what Jesus tried to teach us more about life than the afterlife, like our world would be better. Like I genuinely believe if people, not just Christians, if people did what Jesus actually said, just as simple as the golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated. Like if people actually really did that, think about how much better the world would be. And so it's like one of those things, I do believe following Jesus is the best way. And I 100% believe that what Jesus did on the cross, that there is some type of, and we could go off on that for hours, what that actually means, especially with the whole cosmic Christ idea and stuff that comes out of all that. But it's so big. And I do believe that there's an afterlife. I do believe that there's a kingdom that started with Jesus and even before Jesus, and we are actively being a part of. And I believe in all that. That specific question to me is just so loaded and complex. And, that's what I think about it. That's what I think. I think it's very complex. And my answer is an opinion. And I'm sure there's going to be people that be like, well, John 14:6, here's the thing. People always say, well, the Bible says it, so that settles it. There's a lot of things in the Bible you don't want settling. And I can promise you that. And if you want to live by that code, man, we need to have a talk because there's a whole lot of things you don't want the Bible settling that it said. And so I think that's one of those dangerous things where we have to be having, and that's again, why I recommended the books that I recommend and why I read some of these books that are somewhat controversial, but then, and especially studying doctrine. Seminary was the beginning of my doctrinal experience. Like it doesn't end, and I think there's a lot of people that want it to end and want the simple answer and wanted me probably to answer it simply. And to me, I can't do that. In good conscience, I cannot answer that question simply.
Yeah. And there are churches and pastors who will quote unquote answer that simply.
Yeah.
But it's a very hard line to walk between offering like wisdom and hope and love, and also being able to recognize that like our understanding of God and existence essentially is it's.
Well, can I give one more nugget? Because I can talk about this for the next 2 hours.
Yeah,
so I
go
know
for
we can't. But one of the things is with the only two references we have of Jesus talking about Judgment Day. And I don't believe that good deeds get you into heaven. But the person asked the question, what about the good people that don't know Jesus? The one example is the sheep and the goats. 100% of Jesus' answers about who's going to be in heaven one day is about the people that did good things versus the people that spoke in Jesus' name, but ignored the hurting people of the world. So think about that. At no point in that story does Jesus himself say, well, if you just believe in me, then it's all going to be okay. He talks about people that actually, again, going back to John 14:6, John 14:6 is about understanding who God is and understanding God through Jesus. Jesus is about meeting the needs of people here and now, not just in the afterlife. The other one is the rich man and Lazarus, right? So which is like this parable, but it's this whole confusing thing. Again, why does one guy get to go one place and one guy go the other place? The guy that goes to the bad place, not Abraham's bosom, is because of how he treated people when he was here on earth. Do you know what I'm saying? And now I'm not going to say good deeds get you into heaven or don't, but isn't it interesting that the two times Jesus talks about even remotely sending someone to some type of afterlife, it's all about how you treat people here on earth. It's all about the good that you do here versus you just have to believe something in that. And so like, again, I do believe that we need to believe Jesus is who he says he is. And I do believe that what he did on the cross does something for all of mankind and does something for my sins and my shame. And I do believe that following Jesus is the best way, and maybe the best way to God and the best way to the Father. But to say 100% it's the only way, I'm not going to say it's not true. That's above my pay grade.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about, the sheep and the goats, and it made me think of a song. One of my favorite musicians, he's unfortunately passed away last year, but a guy by the name of Justin Townes Earl, and he has this song called "The Saint of Lost Causes," and he says this in the song: "It's a cruel world, but it ain't hard to understand. You got your sheep, you got your shepherd, and you got your wolves amongst men. It can be hard to tell. You might find a wolf in shepherd's clothes, and now and then you're going to find sheep in amongst all those troubled souls." And this is the part that I really love. More folks that's most afraid of the wolf, but if you really stop and think throughout time, between a wolf and a shepherd, who do you think has killed more sheep? And it's one of those that every time I listen to that song, it's like, man, like there are a lot of quote unquote shepherds that have done a lot of damage out there.
So because this is such April, Spencer, what do you think?
Yeah.
You have definitely different backgrounds than I do. I would say not only educationally, but also theologically in some ways. Yeah.
My theological upbringing was very, very much leaning the way of like, Jesus is absolutely the only way. That verse in John 14 is absolutely 100% definitive. And, just through different conversations with multiple people, after my theological, training, I've had beliefs, shift and grow. But one of the biggest things, and you guys already hit on it, but I was just thinking of this wording of it. I think we've got to ask ourselves a broad question about what you said, Jeremy, like what the point of Scripture is. Is the point of Scripture, church, the gospel, all of it, is it where we end up, or is the focus of all of it who we end up being? And I think that's the question that needs to be answered. I'd actually never really connected those dots that Jesus really only talks about the afterlife twice, and of those two times, it's tied to the way that you treat people. And so I think Jesus is far, far, far more concerned with the person that you end up being, rather than necessarily where you end up. And I think God has good things in store for those who follow him. I think God is gracious and kind. I do believe God is just. I don't know. I think I'll walk away from that question, still pretty, early on in my life, just better understanding that Jesus is way more concerned with who the person that I am, rather than, where I get to hang out after I die. And I feel like if, like you said, Jeremy, I feel like if we could get a hold of that, then we would see far more transformation than just trying to convince people to believe in Jesus because they'll get, a good afterlife out of it.
Well, and I think even something you said there, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, April, but you said that God is just, and I agree.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
Right.
And according to whose justice?
Yeah, and that's a whole other rabbit
I mean, I think
trail.
a lot of people, and that's what I said, I think a lot of people asking that question, they want to know who gets to go to hell because they want certain people to, nobody would ever say that, but that's what they're asking.
And that in and of itself reflects on their character, which I think is the greater issue there.
Yeah.
All right, April, what do you think? And if your mouth isn't too numb to answer.
No, it's not too bad at all. I don't know, honestly. I did not grow up in a Christian home, obviously did not go to Bible college. All I can testify to is that at 18, I remember praying in my dad's backyard on his picnic table, asking God to come into my life, and something happened. And so my life was changed definitely for the better. But I am not a perfect person without sin. So clearly I'm a work in progress as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's a loaded question. And I've been doing a lot of studying too. Like last night, even I was reading, you talked earlier about the toxic church. I've read something from Philip Yancey from that. I've read some stuff from Randy Alcorn, I think it is, on like the afterlife. And he talks a lot about that as well. Just the resurrection of your body and like the number of Christians that don't believe that they're actually going to be resurrected and the new heaven is here literally on earth. Like just, but I struggle with the hell. You know what I mean? Honestly, like I do, like Spencer said, believe that God is just and he's holy. What that looks like, like I can talk about the goodness of God all day long, but biblically there's also a lot of justice in the Bible as well. And I don't know the answer.
Right.
So,
I feel like with this question too, it's also something that you can't just answer and close the book. Like, I feel like this question, if anything, has to be a doorway into a lot of conversation with the people asking it.
Well, and I think that's why I brought up John 14:6 is because I think that's where people turn to. And my thing is, that's not even trying to answer this question. Like if you study what Jesus is saying, not just in that verse, but after that, he's not answering this question. And I don't think the listener was, the reader, I don't know what, again, to me, it becomes personal. Like April, your story was great. You just told it was personal. I'm talking about from a worldwide perspective throughout human history. Sometimes the answer to these questions, you can't make it personal. You have to look at it and go, okay, there's probably a lot going on here that we need to think about and talk about. And,
or make it American.
Here's the thing. At the end of the day, is Jesus the only way to heaven? It's very likely, very possible. But to use one verse to get to that point of view, I think is a little dangerous, to be honest with you. So anyway, so that was kind of the point more or less in this.
And I think the risk there is it can come across as really uncompassionate. We had a missionary bring in some people from Africa one time at a church, and this woman had to tell this story about how there was not even water to drink in their village, but she wanted to be baptized, and so she had to get on a bus and travel like 3 hours away just to be baptized. And there was a guy in the church that a student asked the question, like, well, like God knows her heart. So isn't that enough? And this volunteer that I had, and he stopped being a volunteer after this. He was just very like, nope, if God wants you to be baptized, he's going to make a way for there to be water for you to be baptized. And he made a way for her. And it's like, okay, but what about the people that there isn't a way made for? That starts to get into.
And I think that's the personal side of it, is that at the end of the day, I do believe Jesus is probably the only way to the Father. Right. I think that.
Sure.
Our understanding of what that path is very different. We have a very, very, you get up in front of your church, you say some things, you pray a prayer, you get baptized. When you do those things and you start regularly attending a church and giving to a church and wearing that church's t-shirts out in public, then you've become a Christian.
I'm feeling judged about the t-shirt comment.
What I'm saying is that's what we believe it is to accept Jesus into your life and to follow him. So it is very possible Jesus is the only way to God, and Jesus ultimately may be the only way to heaven. Our understanding of what it looks like to follow Jesus and be the good person here might be the part that's off. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so you may have people, especially in Romans 2, that light accord, like there are people that are probably following Jesus. They're wanting to do better for humanity that may never have a chance to have an altar call ever in their life, but they're following Jesus through the way they treat people, and that's that whole Romans 1, 2, and 3 about the natural law that we all, they're doing good. They're wanting to do it. They just don't have a church near them, or they, like I said, they represented the good news of Jesus as really bad news because of the way it was presented. And so anyway, that, I mean, like I said, we just talked about that probably way too long, but that is a really great question. And whoever that listener was, if you hate my answer, I would be glad to talk to you more about that one-on-one. I find these questions like that, I answered it because it was on here. These are a lot better one-on-one conversations than me and that's why I wanted to bring everybody else in to get their opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's what Jeremy thought. Okay, we're going to blaze through these next couple of things here real fast before we get to our final topic. We just got done with Grinchmas here at Journey. This was my first Grinchmas as a staff member at Journey, and it was awesome. It was overwhelming in a lot of ways, but there were a lot of good ways, and it was great. We had how many people? 3,000 people or something show up.
Somewhere around that.
It was a lot of fun, and we appreciate it if you came out and experience that. It was a lot of fun. The big thing that we want to make sure that you're aware of are our Christmas Eve service times this year. And so next week, because this is dropping on Thursday, the week before Christmas, Christmas Eve services will be happening on 2 separate days. The 23rd, which is a Thursday, at 7 p.m. And then on Friday, the 24th at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. There is childcare at those events, but there is nothing for students. So once, you're 6th grade and above, you'll go to service if you attend those days. And we want to see you out there that day. It's going to be a great service. We're really looking forward to it. That does mean that there will not be any services on Sunday, the 26th. So the day after Christmas, the what some people might consider a Christmas Sunday. We're not having services here at Journey. We're actually having our Christmas Sunday, this Sunday, the 19th, and we really hope to see you out. Anybody else have any announcements to get to before we get to our
There
main
will
topic?
be an online thing that we're doing on the 26th, though. So if you want to get on Facebook or YouTube, it might be on the app. I don't know if we've done that or not, but there will be a short 20-minute video with some songs and some thoughts from staff about Christmas. So if you want to tune that in, we really want you to watch that as a family or, and experience Christmas there with your family and doing that. So yeah, there will be something on the 26th that just won't be in person.
Cool. All right. Okay. So for our main topic, this was a story that was in the news last week and we wanted to get to it last week, but we didn't have a show last week. So we're going to talk about it right now. So a plumber was working at Lakewood Church in Houston. And if you're not sure what Lakewood Church is, that's Joel Osteen's church. And this plumber was working on a leaky pipe behind a wall, and he found hundreds of thousands of dollars stashed in this wall. And this has led to quite a bit of criticism and people calling out the church, not just Lakewood Church, but kind of churches in general. What does any church need that kind of money for? The church is just a place for greedy pastors to, say, give me your money so that I can have a big house and all that. Yeah. So kind of the question I want to ask is, why does the church need, why is it important for the church to have financial resources and does giving, and I guess the bigger question really is, does giving to the church even matter in the life of a Christian person? Or is it just kind of this outdated way of supporting the mission of spreading the good news? I don't know. What do you think, Jeremy?
I think this story is interesting for a couple of things before I enter that part of it. The first one is it was $600,000.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
So for people that don't know, our budget just came out last year. Our budget, we run a shoestring, budget here. I mean, it's tight. We've never made it about money. So our operating budget for the entire year, that's paying all of our staff for the building, all of our resources, giving away 20% of that, is $500,000. So they had our entire budget in their bathroom wall and they didn't even miss it. So that is interesting. The other thing is kudos to this guy. Like, I got to be honest with you. If I found $600,000 like, it'd be one thing if you found it like, you know, in somebody's office, but to find it behind a wall, which means it's been there for a while and they clearly don't miss it. I mean, I gotta be honest with you. That's, you know, I may not take all 600,000, but they may have only got 500,000 of that back. I mean, you know, $100,000 is a lot of money. The other interesting thing, and Rusty, you know this, they weren't going to pay him the finder's fee. They knew they had been missing the money for a few years. Apparently years ago, they got broke into, and apparently this is where they'd stolen the money or whatever. They had a $25,000 reward.
He didn't get paid it?
At first he didn't. They weren't going to pay him. Oh my gosh. And then eventually there was like public outcry. So he just found $600,000.
$25,000.
Yeah, and they weren't. They were at first they weren't, and there was public. So those are all interesting details of the story.
Oh my gosh.
As far as this goes, here would be my thoughts, and these are really, really my thoughts. First of all, a church. So many people want to be like, we want a New Testament church. Okay, no, you don't. Okay, you do not want the church of the New Testament because it's very different than what we would say. You know, I do believe with George Carlin that sometimes churches are more like country clubs than anything else. Like, I do love that little bit he has about that. And but here's the thing: we do need money because we are an organization. I do believe, and I can't speak for every church, but I know our church is doing a lot of good in the community. And we pay people to work here who make salaries, and I make a salary off of working here to do this. I could not do what I do and go work another job. Now that may not be true of everybody, but I couldn't do it. And I couldn't do it to the way that I do it and with the energy that I do it, for sure. So that's part of it. And that's not me being selfish. That's just me being honest. You know, we have a staff here that makes it as easy as possible for people to come, to be a part of a church, to volunteer at a church. I mean, Grinchmas is, yes, put on by volunteers, but our staff carried most of the weight for that, you know, for those community offerings. And so, you know, I do think churches as an organization, they do need people to give. I do think giving to a church is a biblical concept. I'm not going to get into what percentage of it. You know, I preach about that one time a year, and I just say, pick a percentage that works for you if you believe in what we're doing here and that we're making our community better. I will say, if your church is not making your community better, maybe you don't need to give to it so much. This one with Lakewood, and I try not to get into the Joel Osteen thing too much just because he's not my favorite. But I mean, it's insane what they have. I mean, he makes, you know, I do make money here. You can find out what it is if you look at the budget. But he makes like $4 million a year, and that's not including his books. I'm not against like people making money, but what do you need $4 million for? Like, you're doing the exact same job I do. And I would argue, and I'm a better preacher than Joel Osteen. I'm not even going to lie about that. He might be more charismatic than I am, for sure.
But he's got such a great smile.
He does have a great smile. I don't have as good of a smile
It
as
looks
his,
like a mixture of Tim Allen and Martin Short.
But I do wrestle with this because I do think that, because I see both sides of it. I can be very cynical, and especially about stuff like this. And there's a lot of churches I'm like, it wouldn't be the worst thing if they closed their doors tomorrow. And you know, so I do wrestle with that, but I do think giving is important. I think the Bible talks about giving is better than receiving. I do think there's a sense in the Bible of giving to help people. I know what our church does as far as our generosity to our community, and what we're trying to do here in the community. So, I mean, at the end of the day, though, I always say this every year I talk about money. If you don't trust us, don't give to us. Give somewhere else. Find somebody you can partner with that you think is making your world better and give to them. So that's my 2 cents on that. But yeah, what do y'all think?
I think that you mentioned cynicism. I think that's a growing thing. I don't know if y'all follow them, but I follow like Preachers and Sneakers.
Oh yeah.
Great account. Yeah. But I have noticed, like, you know, people in my generation, like, they're not just noticing it, they're like calling it out. You know, like these guys who pastor these huge, like very, very wealthy churches, and I can't speak to their personal lives. You know, I mean, I've been gifted, you know, expensive things before, and that may be the case. But, you know, when you're walking on stage with a pair of shoes that's $1,200, I mean, I think the growing question with a lot of people is like, where is my tithe money going?
Well, even if you're gifted something,
sure,
that I there is a place to say like, hey, I appreciate this gift, but this, you know, me wear the perception that could happen,
sure,
because I'm wearing this $2,000 Gucci jacket that you gifted me, but it could also, to the single mom who's having to choose between feeding her kids and paying her rent, what message does that send? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Or pastors with a clothing budget. I don't get that at all. Someone pays you to get dressed and
I have a clothing budget. It's just for Goodwill.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, me being what I do for a living, I struggle with most of my contemporaries because for so many of them, it seems to be, the other thing, it's not even about money, is the celebrity side of it.
Right. Yeah.
People that know me know I don't want recognition. I actually, like, if I found out y'all were giving me an award, I would probably just not come that Sunday. Like, I'm not being I don't need that stuff. I don't care about that stuff. I don't care if I do appreciate being a little bit Shepherdsville famous, going to walk around, know people, but that's just because I like to know people. But as far as like fame and like all that stuff, like I don't care. And I just see so many guys that do what I do that it almost seems like that's what's driving them, is to become famous and have people know who they are. And I think clothing and money comes along with that stuff. I mean, if you see me, and staff can attest this, I'm pretty much wearing the same outfit every day. It's just a different color hoodie. And I have 4 pairs of Levi jeans, and they're just all a little bit slightly different shades of blue. That's what you're gonna see me wearing. I mean, and I'm not saying that to like brag. I'm just saying like that stuff's just never appealed to me. But yeah, I mean, gosh, it's tough, and I get why people are cynical about it. But again, I do think what we're doing here is good. I only talk about money one time a year because I think people know, and there are churches that talk about it 30, 40 times a year, and you have to. The other thing is buildings. I mean. And I got to be careful how I say this. I mean, we bought this building for like $200,000, and it works. It gives me headaches all the time.
Building.
It's a great building. When I hear some of my buddies that are now $10 million in debt, I mean, they've become slaves to that building. And
it can change a church.
It can change a church, and it definitely changes. I know guys that would agree with me. They don't want to preach about money, but have to. Because they don't have an option. Because if they don't preach about money, people aren't going to give, and then they can't pay their mortgage.
Well, we saw that a lot with COVID too last year when churches were shut down. Like a lot of churches had to let go of staff and stuff as well because of all the overhead. And
well, not even just like preaching about giving, but I've even seen it where like, because you have to pay the mortgage and because you're a slave to the building, like everything you do then becomes this effort of how we're going to pull more people in to increase money so that we can pay these bills.
Well, that's what I'm saying about it changing the church.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and changing what you're giving to people too. Like I've even seen it where like, let's take the gospel and let's package it to make it to where we get the most money out of it. And that's where I think
you talk about our question we answered today being complex. I have seen guys that I know are smart and well-educated have massaged verses and ideas from the Bible so much to make it fit within this message of you got to give, you got to give, you got to give this, you got to give this. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, you are so far away from what this verse and this author and this writer, and no wonder people are cynical, not just about church and giving, but about the church and the Bible and all of this stuff, because you become slaves to it. It has to fit an agenda. And all of a sudden now you have these well-intentioned, and I believe most of them start out well-intentioned people, that all of a sudden they get caught up in it, and it becomes about greed and the building, and they've got to massage the truth in order to make it fit their agenda because they got a bill to pay at the end of the month. And anyway, it is, but $600,000, man, that's a lot of money. And to find that in the wall.
Well, let's all make a commitment that if we find $600,000 in the wall of Journey Church, we will just split it amongst ourselves and never speak of it.
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Well, that's it for our show today. Thank you all so much. You would think my mouth was numb by how many times I've misspoke. You got a little drool, April.
Shut up. Whatever.
All right. We'll see you again. We got a new episode coming out in 2 weeks, right before Christmas. It's our Christmas gift to you. We hope to see you here soon.